Welcome back to On the Same Page. We are on Daf Tes Amud Beis, 9b of Maseches Brachos, and we're starting 9 lines down the page. And the Gemara left off, it discussed how, before the Jewish people left Egypt, Hashem asked Moshe to tell them to go and request gold and silver vessels from the Egyptians to fulfill the promise to Avraham that that after their enslavement they'll go out with great wealth. So the Gemara now quotes the pasuk that talks about those events. It says Vayash ilum. So it's a pasuk that says Hashem gave the chain, made the Jewish people graceful in the eyes of the Egyptians, Vayash ilum, vayinatzuas Mitzrayim, and they borrowed from them, or they lent to them, it's not clear, and they emptied out Mitzrayim, they emptied out Egypt. So the Gemara says, Vayash ilum, Amar Ami melamed, this teaches, Shehish ilum bal karcham, that they caused them to borrow against their will. And again, it's a little unclear who caused who to borrow against their will. Meaning, does it mean that, well, I guess we could just see it. The Gemara says, Ika da'amri bal karcham de Mitzrayim. Some say it means that the Jewish people borrowed against the will of the Egyptians, that they forced them to lend them or give them their possessions. The Ika da'amri, and some say bal karcham de Yisrael, and some say it's that the Egyptians forced the Jews to take the vessels. Vayash ilum could mean that they caused them to borrow them. Meaning, is it Vayash ilum they made them lend, or is it and they made them borrow? So one understanding is that the Egyptians forced the Jewish people to take them. Now, Manda Amar Bal Karcham de Mitzrayim, the one who says that it was against the will of the Egyptians, Dichsiv, because the pasuk says in Tehillim, Univas bayis techalek shalal. So those who dwell in the houses, they divided the spoils. It seems this pasuk is a reference to these events, and it calls them spoils. Spoils generally imply that it was against their will. So based on that, the implication is that the Jews took against the will of the Egyptians. Manda Amar Bal Karcham de Yisrael, and the opinion that says that it was against the will of the Jewish people, that they were forced to take them. Why would you have to force them? Mishum Masli, because of the load, because of the burden, and you're about to go into the midbar, into the desert, they don't necessarily want so much, but the Egyptians said, take it, take it. Okay. Vayinatzuas Mitzrayim, they emptied out Egypt. What is this expression, Vayinatzlu? So Amar Rabbi Ami said, Melamed, this teaches Sha'asua kimitsuda she'en badagan. They made it like a trap that doesn't have any grain. So when you trap birds, you put grain in the net, or wherever the trap is, but this, in a certain sense, I guess the trap was open, they left, but they emptied the trap, they emptied it out, and it seems that it's taking the word mitzula and relating it to the word mitsuda, that they made it like a mitsuda, like a trap that had no grain. Reish Lakish says, Asua kimitzula she'en badagim. They made it like the mitzula. Vayinatzlu would relate to the word mitzula, and mitzula is the depths of the sea. So they made it like the depths of the sea where there are no fish. There's probably some fish down there, but the deeper you go, there's certain fish that don't go there anymore. So they made it like the depths of the sea that has no fish. That's Vayinatzlu, they emptied it out. Okay. Now, the Gemara discusses another point relating to Mitzrayim. It says that when Moshe was at the burning bush, Moshe Moshe asked Hashem, they're going to ask me, what's your name? What should I say to them? So Hashem said, Ekia asher Ekia, I will be where I will be. What does that mean? Amar le'kadosh baruch hu Moshe. Hashem said to Moshe, Lechem or lahem le'Yisrael, go tell the Jewish people, Ani yayisi imachem b'shibud zeh, that I was with you in this shibud, this enslavement. Vani eya imachem b'shibud malchus, and I'll also be with you in the subjugation to the different kingdoms. In other words, Hashem was telling Moshe, tell them, Ekia asher Ekia means I will be with you, then as I am with you, as I was with you in this exile, I will be with you in the other exiles. So Amar Lefanav, so Moshe said to him, Ribono Shalom, Daya Litzara B'Shaita, it's enough for the suffering in its time. In other words, Moshe is saying, I don't want to tell them that there's going to be other exiles. Let's just keep that, hidden from them. Let's not talk about that now. So we shouldn't introduce you as, I'm the one who's with you in this exile, and I'll be with you in other exiles. Let's not talk about other exiles right now. It's enough for them to deal with their current suffering. Amar le'kadosh baruch hu, so Hashem said, Leichem or lehem, go tell them, Ekia shalachani aleichem. So the pasuk then goes on, and it says, so says Hashem, so you should say, and then it only says Ekia once, only Ekia once. So Hashem accepted Moshe's suggestion and said, okay, let's just tell them Ekia. I will be, meaning I was with you in this galus, in this exile. Now the Gemara shifts to a different episode, not relating to Yetzias Mitzrayim, but relating to Eliyahu Hanavi. The connection is not so clear why it now comes to this. Actually, the Gemara earlier mentioned this. The Gemara back on Vav Amar Beis. But I'll tell you in a moment what the Maharsha says. So, Aneni Hashem Aneni. So when Eliyahu Hanavi is on Mount Carmel, and he's having a showdown to prove who's the real God, is it Hashem or is it the Baal? And he says they each bring out an offering, and if a fire will come down from heaven, that will prove who the true God is. And of course, it doesn't work for the Baal worshippers. And then Eliyahu Hanavi davens to Hashem, and he says this: Aneni Hashem Aneni. Answer me, Hashem. Answer me. And why does he say it twice? So Amar Rabbi Abo, Lamar Eliyahu Aneni Beis Pamim. Why did he say Aneni twice? Why did he say answer me twice? Melame, it teaches Sha'amar Eliyahu Ifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That Eliyahu was saying before Hashem, Ribono Shalom, Master of the universe, Aneni Sheter Yedesh Min HaShamayim. The first time he's saying answer me, he meant answer my prayers, that fire should come down. I'm doing this to prove that you're the true God. Answer me, let the fire come down. V'tocha kol asher al mizbeach, I'm going to consume everything on the mizbeach, on the altar. And then he said again, Ve'aneni, and answer me, Shetasiach daitam, so that their minds, their thoughts should be directed in the right direction. Shelo yomru maisek shafim heim, that they don't say it's just magic, it's just sorcery. This wasn't from Hashem, it's just sorcery. So a person has the ability to kind of deny or justify, and Eliyahu was concerned, even though they saw the fire come down from heaven, they'll just say, no, it wasn't Hashem, it was just sorcery. Shenemar, as it says, V'ata hasibosas liba machoranis. So, after he says these words, Eliyahu says, Aneni Hashem Aneni, answer me Hashem, answer me, and V'yedu amazeki ata Hashem Elokim, and this nation should know that you're Hashem, the God, the Master, V'ata hasibosas liba machoranis, and you turn their hearts away. So, what was he saying when you turn their hearts away? So, I think the Gemara is interpreting that he's saying, let us not say that you turn their hearts away. In other words, if they, this I think along the lines of what the Maharsha says, if they would see this and deny it, then I'd be able to say, you turn their hearts away. This is not normal. And the connection to the previous discussion, connection to Mitzrayim at least, is that's actually what happened with Paro, is that for the first Makos, Paro tried to just deny it and say it was sorcery, which maybe at the beginning he had grounds to say that. But eventually he wasn't going to say it. And what happened? Hashem hardened his heart. So in this case, Eliyahu is saying, let them not say it's Maisik Shafim, it's just sorcery, and then I would say that you turn their hearts if they say that, because it would be like Paro, who you hardened his heart. That's what the Maharsha says over here, and that will explain at least some of the connection between this last paragraph and what we were previously discussing. Okay, new Mishnah. So the first Mishnah talked about when you say the Shema in the evening. This Mishnah talks about when you say the Shema in the morning. From when? What is the earliest time that one can say Shema in the morning? It's the time that a person can distinguish between the color techeles, bluish, turquoise-ish, indigo color, actually, and lavan, and white. So it's sometime after it's first light in the morning. It's before sunrise. It's when it's getting a little light, and it's enough that one can distinguish between white and indigo and techeles. Rabbi Eliezer says, "Bein techeles lekarti." It's between techeles and karti, which is a leek, green leek. So it's actually more similar colors. So it has to be right. So indigo and green are more similar than indigo and white. So it will be a later time. It has to be more light that you could distinguish between those two colors. And these seem to be just interpretations of when people get up, right? We know that you say Shema Uvkumecha when you get up. And how much light do people start to get up? If it's too dark without any electric lights, you can't do anything in the morning until it's light enough that you can see. How much do you have to be able to see? So one opinion says you have to be able to distinguish between techeles and white, and one opinion says between techeles and leek green. And what's the latest time? So this is continuing Rabbi Eliezer's statement, ad hanetzachama, until sunrise. According to Rabbi Eliezer, you have to say Kriya Shema by sunrise. Rabbi Yeshua says, ad shalosh sha'os. You have until 3 hours into the day. Because it is the way of kings to get up 3 hours into the day. So yes, many people get up at sunrise, and so Rabbi Eliezer says that's the latest, but Rabbi Yeshua says that we go by Melachim, kings, meaning there's a group of people, princes I guess, they get up later, and so that qualifies as the time that people get up. You have until 3 hours. Some girses are b'nei melachim, which would mean princes. Princes get up at 3 hours. Hakore mikan va'elach. If you read after that, read the Shema after the latest time. Lo hifsid, you don't lose out by reading Shema. It's like you're reading from the Torah. It's learning Torah. You don't fulfill the mitzvah of Kriya Shema. The mitzvah of Kriya Shema, the Torah mitzvah is uvkumecha when you get up. And once you pass the time, you can't fulfill the Torah mitzvah. But it's just reading psukim from the Torah. It's learning Torah, so it doesn't hurt to read it. But you won't fulfill the mitzvah. Okay, ask the Gemara, my bein techelos ulavan. We said the earliest time is, according to the first opinion, between, when you can tell the difference between techeles and lavan and white. On what? What techeles, what white? If we mean like a pile of white wool and a pile of techeles wool, that's dyed indigo. That you can even see at night. Even with a tiny bit of light from the moon, you could tell the difference between like a pile of wool that's white and a pile of wool that's dark, that's techeles. So that's not what we could be talking about. Ella bein techeles sheba lelavan sheba. So rather what we mean is the techeles on it to the white on it. And here Rashi understands that means, let's say you dye something techeles, you dye a pile of wool techeles. It's not all going to be techeles, there's going to be spots that you missed. And so within the very garment, there will be some white spots. It's when you can recognize those spots. That's how light it would have to be. And Tosfos, though, disagrees. He has a question from a Gemara in Menachos, and Tosfos says it refers to the tzitzis, strings and knots themselves, that you're going to have some white and some techeles, and it's to be able to, it's when you can distinguish on the strings themselves. Tanya, we're learning a brisa. Rabbi Meir Omer, Mishayakir ben ze'ev lekelev. You have to be able to recognize the difference between a wolf and a dog. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Rabbi Akiva says, Ben chamor le'arad, between a regular donkey and a wild donkey. Ve'acherim Omer, others say, which usually refers to Rabbi Meir, it's the point where you could see your friend 4 amos away and recognize him. Once it's light enough to recognize your friend at 4 amos away, then you know it's uvkumecha, and that is actually the halacha that we follow. And that's what the Gemara says. Amar Rav Huna halacha ke'acherim. Halacha is like acherim, like this last opinion, that the time is when you can recognize your friend from 4 amos away. There is discussion in halacha if this overlaps with others of these descriptions, if some of them are at the same time or not. Amar Abaye said, "L'tefillin ke'acherim." That for tefillin we go like acherim. We go like that opinion. That the earliest time for tefillin is Mishayakir, when you can recognize your friend 4 amos away. But l'kriya shema kivasikin. But the time for shema is actually at the time of the vasikin. The vasikin are those who is a term for those who are very scrupulous about how they do mitzvos. And when do people who are vasikin, who are very scrupulous about mitzvos, when do they say shema? Dam Rabbi Yochanan vasikin hayu gomrin osa ima netzachama. They would finish shema right before netz, right before sunrise. That's the best time. You shouldn't say shema earlier, ideally. You should say it with sunrise. Tanya nami hachi, we have a brisa that says this, Vasikna yigomrin osa ima netzachama. The Vasikin would finish Shema with sunrise, Kidei sheyismoch geula l'tfila v'nimtza mispalel bayom. In order to juxtapose the mentioning of redemption with tefillah, and it would turn out that you're davening shachris in the daytime. In other words, there seems to be a preference to daven shachris after sunrise, or at sunrise. It's a special time. Once the sun is over the horizon, that's a unique time, and you want to be somich gula tefillah. You want to mention the redemption, which we talk about at the end of Shema, right before you daven Shemona Esrei. This we are in earlier Gemara. So it gets a person's gratitude. They can then shift to avoda, to serving Hashem with Shemona Esrei. Perhaps that's the connection. So there's this preference to be somich gula tefillah, to juxtapose tefillah to gula. Now tefillah should be said right after sunrise, which means that Shema should be said right before sunrise. So that's the ideal time. Amar Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera said, "Ma'ikra." We actually have a pasuk that implies that this is the ideal time for Shema, because it says, "Yiraucha im shamesh, v'lifnei yareach dor dorim," that they should fear you with the sun, meaning they should. Shema is accepting the yoke of heaven, and when should they accept the yoke of heaven? As the sun is about to come out, which is sunrise. And then the second half of the pasuk is lifnei yareach dor dorim, and before the moon for generations. That Rashi adds in that's referring to mincha. Mincha should be said as the sun is going down, or right before the sun goes down. Okay, but that's a side point. But our point is that there's a pasuk, Yeruchim Shemesh, that they should fear you with the sun, implying they should accept the yoke of heaven with Shema right before the sun comes up. Hayed Rabbi Yossi ben Eliakim, Mishum Kahala Kadisha de Birushalayim. Rabbi Yossi ben Eliakim testified in the name of the Kahal Kadisha de Birushalayim, the holy congregation of Yerushalayim, some group of Chachamim, of sages, the following: whoever juxtaposes the mention of redemption with their tefillah, with their Shmona Esrei, eino nizuk kol hayom kulo. They won't be harmed the whole day. This is a protection to be somech kulo tefillah. You won't be harmed the whole day. Amar Reb Zeira saying, "Eini, is that true? V'ana samchi. I was somech kulo tefillah. I juxtaposed the redemption with my tefillah, v'itzigi, and I was harmed." Amar le, so Rabbi Yossi ben Eliakim said, "B'may itzakta? In what way were you harmed? De'am tayis asa lebei malka? Because you had to bring a branch to a myrtle branch to the king, to the emperor, the governor, whatever it was in that time. That's the problem. That's not a big deal. Meaning, it sounds like Reb Zera viewed that as like, I was harmed, I had to do this, I had to go to the king's house. And Rabbi Yossi ben Eliakim said, "Hastam nami malka." That's something that's worth even paying for, to be able to see the king's face. That's not being harmed. That's good to be able to see the king's face. Why? Da'amar Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan said, a person should run to greet kings of Israel. Now, this wasn't a king of Israel. This was, I guess, probably a Roman. But a person should run to greet a king of Israel, but not only to greet kings of Israel, but even kings of the other nations. Why? Because if you would merit to see a king of Israel in the future, you'll be able to differentiate between the king of Israel and the kings of the non-Jews. In other words, that even though we don't have a king, he's saying, but Bezras Hashem will have Melech HaMashiach, will have the king Mashiach come soon. And you want to be able to compare him to what a Gentile king is like. You'll see how great Mashiach is by comparing him to a Gentile king. So it's good to go to see a Gentile king. Okay. Amar le Rabbi Yula le'ula. Rabbi Yula said to Ula, Ki ayalta lahasam. When you go there, I guess to Eretz Yisrael, Sha'el b'shlama de Rabruna achi. Find out how my brother Rabruna is doing. B'maimad kol achabura. In front of the group. De Adam gadolhu. Because he's a great man. V'samach b'mitzvos. And he rejoices with mitzvos. I don't know why that has to do with checking on him, but okay, he said check on him and he's a great man. And he rejoices in mitzvos. What's an example of that? And this is the connection. Zimna chada samach gula tefillah. One time he was samach gula tefillah. He juxtaposed the redemption with tefillah. V'lo pasik chucha mipnei kul yama. And his smile didn't leave him the whole day. So I don't know why he only did it one time. But maybe he felt that time he really got it right. And that day, he was smiling the whole day. So you see how much he loves mitzvahs. And that's why he mentions it here, because it had to do with being samach gula tefillah, juxtaposing the redemption with your tefillah. Ask the Gemara, Hechi matzi samach. How could you actually juxtapose gula with tefillah? Ha'amar Rabbi Yochanan, b'tchilahu omer, Hashem sefasai tiftachu, v'sofu omer, yil ratzon in refi. Rabbi Yochanan said that at the beginning of your Shemona Esrei you should say the pasuk in Tehillim, Hashem sefasai tiftach, Hashem, open up my lips and let my mouth tell your praises. Isn't that an interruption? And also, by the way, at the end, side point, at the end you say, Yul ratzon refi, let the words of my mouth be your will, or be desired to you, and the thoughts of my heart. So, but our question is from the beginning. How could you be so much gula tefillah, juxtapose them, if Rabbi Yochanan said you have to interrupt with the pasuk Hashem sefasai tiftach? So the Gemara says, Amar Belazar tehei b'tefillah shel arvis. That's at Ma'ariv. At Ma'ariv you say Hashem sefasai tiftach. That's what Rabbi Yochanan meant. But at Shachris, don't, because you have to be so much gula tefillah. Don't say Hashem sefasai tiftach. Rabbi Yochanan, but didn't Rabbi Yochanan say, Ezehu ben al maba? Who's a member of the World to Come Club? Who's going to the World to Come? Somech geula shall arvis l'tefillah shall arvis. That's if you juxtapose the mention of geula at Ma'ariv, even Ma'ariv, to the Shemona Esrei at Ma'ariv. So Ella Amar Balazar, so rather Balazar te b'tfilas ha-mincha. Fine. You say Hashem Tzvasai Tivtach ha-mincha, but Shachar Ma'ariv don't because it's an interruption. Rav Ashi is a different answer. No, you could say it all three. You could say Hashem Tzvasai Tivtach before Shemona Esrei, and it's not considered an interruption. Since the rabbis established it as part of the tefillah, it's an extension of the tefillah. And it's part of the tefillah. So it's not considered an interruption because it's rabbinically sanctioned to say that and add that on as part of the tefillah. It's part of the tefillah, it's not an interruption. Because if you don't say that, we have a question, how are you being somech geula tefillah, juxtaposing geula and tefillah at Ma'ariv, you have to say the bracha of hashkivenu. And hashkivenu is not about geula. Hashkivenu is the second bracha at Ma'ariv. First bracha is Ga'al, not second bracha, the second bracha after Shema. The first bracha after Shema is Ga'al Yisrael, that's geula. And then you say Hashkivenu. Hashkivenu is not about geula, it's about Hashem protecting us at night, ending our travels. So, isn't that an interruption? So, explains the Gemara, Ella, what you have to say is Kema D'Ziknu Rabbanan Hashkivenu Kigula Richtadamya. That since the rabbis enacted it, it's like an extension of Geula. It's a tack on to the Geula. So you mention Ga'al Yisrael, then you mention Hashkivenu, which we mentioned in the past. The idea may be, the Maharal says, that Hashkivenu, the protection is part of the redemption. Redemption without being followed by protection is not that valuable. You have to be protected afterwards. So we'll say the same thing with regards to Hashem Tzvasai Tiftach. Kivan de kavur rabbanan betfila ketfila rechtadamya. Since the rabbis established it to be part of Shemona Esrei, so then it's part of the tefillah. So Hashkivenu is an extension of the geula, of the redemption part, and Hashem Tzvasai Tiftach is an extension of the tefillah part, and they're not interruptions because they're part of geula and part of tefillah. Okay, now we turn to the pasuk of Yul Ratzon, which we say after Shemona Esrei Mechti. Let's examine this. Hi Yul Ratzon Imrei Fi. That which we say that it's a pasuk in Tehillim, and it says that the words of my mouth should be Yul Ratzon, should be desired before you. Mashma lebesofu mashma meikara. Its implication is it could be said at the beginning or at the end, meaning in terms of what it means. We say at the end, but you could say at the beginning. You could say, let the words I'm about to say be desired. It sounds like it should have been said at the beginning. My time of tiknu rabbanon lachar yidches brachos. Why did the rabbis enact that it should be said after Shemona Esrei, let it be said before? Amar Yehuda Brei Reb Shimon ben Pazi. So Yehuda, the song of Reb Shimon ben Pazi explained, because Halav v'lo Amru David elo la'achar yudches parshios l'fikach tiknu rabbanon la'achar yudches brachos. This pasuk of Yul Ratzon, what chapter of Tehillim is it found in? So the Gemara says it's found in chapter 19. So since it's found in chapter 19, it's after 18. So that's why the rabbis placed it after the 18 blessings, because it's found in chapter 19 after 18 psalms, 18 chapters of Tehillim. So we say it after the 18 brachos. Ask the Gemara. Hani Yudches Yutes Avyan. What do you mean that it's after 18, it's after 19? Now, just note, I believe. For us, it's in chapter 19. And the Gemara is aware of that. The question assumes that when we say it should be said after 18, it means once you've entered the 18th one. As part of, I think that it's right. It's the last pasuk of the 19th chapter. So really, according to the answer seems to assume that it's the last pasuk of the 18th chapter. I didn't double check, but I think it's the last pasuk. So the Gemara assumes that it's the last pasuk of the 18th chapter. So it says, at the end of 18 chapters, you say it. Ask the Gemara, what do you mean? It's not the end of the 18th, it's the end of the 19th. So it's not after 18, it's after 19. So the Gemara explains. So he asks, Hani Yudches Yatesam, it's not 18, it's after 19. Answers the Gemara, Ashrei Yish v'Lamar Shugayim Chada Parshahi. The first two chapters of Tehillim, Ashrei Yish and Lamar Rakshu, is really one in the Gemara's count. And therefore, if that's one, then what we have as the 19th is really the 18th. And so it is after 18. Where do we see this, that those are really one? So, the Amar Rabbi Yehuda Breder Bishum Pazi, Kuf Gimel Parshios Amar David V'Amar Haluka Ad Sheram B'Mapalosin Shal Rishayim. David HaMelech got through 103 chapters of Tehillim, and he never said the word Hallelujah until he described the fall of the wicked. Shenemar, as it says at the end of chapter 103, which we're going to see in a moment is really 104, but what the Gemara seems to assume is 103, it says, Yitamu chatayim min haaretz, the sins will be destroyed, will be removed from the world, Rishayim od einam, there will no longer be any wicked. So, Baruch Nafshi Hashem, Hallelujah. My soul praises Hashem, Hallelujah. That's the first time Hallelujah appears in Tehillim. And it's after 103 chapters. But ask the Gemara, Hani Kuf Gimel, 103. Kuf Daud Avyam, it's after 104. Same type of question. Elash Mamina. So we can learn from here that Ashrei Ish V'Lamar Shugayim Chada Parshahi, that the first two chapters are really one. If the first two are really one, then what we think is the 19th is really the 18th, and what we think is the 104th is really the 103rd. And where do we see that these first two chapters are really one chapter? The Amar Reb Shmuel Bar Nachmani Amar Rabbi Yochanan, top of the next page, because Reb Shmuel Bar Nachmani is saying the name of Rabbi Yochanan, called Parsha Shaisa Chaviva al David. Every parsha that was very dear to David, Pasach ba be'ashrei b'siyim ba be'ashrei. He started with the word ashrei and he ended with the word, or the last verse started with the word ashrei. So where do we see that? Pasach ba'ashrei dichsev ashrei ish Ashrei Ha'ish. He started with Ashrei, the very first chapter of Tehillim begins, Ashrei Ha'ish, Asher L'Hach, Batzis Rishayim. Fortunate or praiseworthy is the man. The very first word of Tehillim is Ashrei. And seeing Ashrei, he ended that chapter with Ashrei, Dichsiv Ashrei Kol Choseba, which is the end of, right, fortunate or praiseworthy are those who take refuge in him. But that's the last pasuk of chapter 2. So, but it's saying that this is an example of a chapter that's very dear because it begins and ends with Ashrei. But it's 2 chapters. So what do you see? That really it's one. That really the first 2 chapters are one chapter, and therefore when we say that Yul Ratzon appears at the end of the 18th chapter, and we have it in the 19th, but really according to this count it's really the end of the 18th, and the first time Hallelujah appears, even though we have it at the end of the 104th chapter, it really is the end of the 103rd because the first 2 chapters are really one chapter. Okay, we will resume from here, Be'ezras Hashem, next time.